All right, everybody, this is Sheets. I'm going to be going over the afternoon slate now. Again, I have a little time today, so figured to have some fun and just go through each individual slate for those who are interested. This starts at 3 o'clock p.m. and it incorporates some of the games that are already from the FanDuel slate, but now it lets you get in these games on the DraftKings slate as well. So let me just kind of go through this kind of separately. With DraftKings, it does look as though Harden is a very, very tough fade over there right out of this first game. Now, I will, we'll get to FanDuel in a minute, but Kyrie going back to Cleveland on Martin Luther King Day seems to be something I do not want to particularly fade. You want to know the truth. So maybe this is one of those situations where even though he's much better on FanDuel, maybe you play him on DraftKings also. I don't know. But nonetheless, I mean, as far as the numbers go, it looks as though Harden is clearly the best play on the slate by a good amount. And then a pretty decent sized drop to the next two guys, which are actually Ja and, well, there are a few others actually, but Vooch is showing up as a really, really good center. Now, as I went over earlier, though, I just feel as though, again, I don't want to get too narrative driven on this day, but you get Jared Allen playing against his old team, even though it's at Cleveland. Boy, oh boy, I think he might be, I don't want to say low owned, but maybe lower owned than some of these others. Is he somehow, no, he's only center eligible, which might keep his ownership down a little bit. Where on FanDuel, he's going to be, power forward eligible also. So we'll have to see about that. But so there's Ja, Vooch, Kyrie, DeRozan, Sabonis, Garland. All of these guys rate to be very similar to me. So again, it's Harden and then either Morant, Vooch, Irving, DeRozan, Garland, and then a kind of a drop down to Allen, but I kind of want to play him anyway. So that's it from kind of like a spend up perspective. Now look at it from kind of a value perspective. You have a couple of guys. You get from Chicago. You get Alfonso McKinney at a flat 3K, almost 6x. And then you have Ayu Dosunmu, or Dosunmu, who is almost 6x. So those are the two kind of value plays. And if you do want to play some, two studs, for example, then you might want to try these guys like Dosunmu at 4,600, but also McKinney maybe at 3K. Maybe that's kind of worth doing. So let's go back in game by game. Let's say if you want to identify one to stack here. You'll notice I didn't really mention the Clipper game that much. We'll get to some of those guys in a minute, but the Brooklyn-Cleveland game is not really a value type game, but more of just kind of like a raw points type game. So if you want to play Harden and Irving or run it back with Garland, I certainly, just same as I kind of did in FanDuel earlier, you certainly have my blessing as far as that goes. So let's say you want to do Garland. Is he shooting guard eligible? No, he is not. So it's interesting. So you could make Kyrie work at shooting guard, and then you end up fading Harden at really, really high ownership. That's a 3-game slate. If you can get away with it, I mean, that's pretty badass, if you want to know the truth. Now, again, you're giving up a lot of projections to do that. I mean, he rates to be the best play by about 15 fantasy points almost. Maybe not 15, but about 10 fantasy points. So if you don't, if Harden goes off, you are going to lose. But if he doesn't, you're on a 3-game slate going to be in business here. And aside from that, I guess you could play Mobley, but I do think Garland's a significantly better play. So I would play Garland and one of these, either Garland and Irving or Garland and Harden, with the idea that Garland and Harden is certainly going to be the higher owned. And I do have Garland as being somewhat lower owned. I mean, actually, that's about 30% also, but it's a 3-game slate. You're going to get that. Let me just relook at the value just for the hell of it. Yeah, not much coming out of that game. If you want to know the truth. And I know Claxton is out, but none of this other stuff is really popping for me right now. I could look a little bit later, but it just doesn't look that way. You'll get probably Aldridge. He's full 5K though. I don't need that. All right, Indianapolis LAC. This is definitely, farther down on the list, but I mean, you do have guys here that are good prices. Like you have in value plays, you do have Marcus Morris, and then there's Nicholas Batum and Terrence Mann. I think all those guys are viable. They're not as good as some of the others, but they're not bad. And when it comes to the spend ups, I mean, again, maybe Marcus Morris, and that's about it. So this is definitely, the weaker of the bunch. But like you said, you get low ownership on this maybe. And then if you want Indiana, there's really not a lot. Like LeVert is kind of a bad price. I guess Sabonis would be the way I would go. Yeah, I mean, Sabonis is fine over here. So if you wanted to play him, play him at maybe power forward. He's 10-2. I mean, I don't think he's going to get a lot of ownership either. Because people are really going to want to play Harden. And for good reason, but it's 3-game slate. Anything can happen. And Chicago, Memphis. Yeah, I mean, Morant raised to be, as I mentioned at the top, a very, very strong play. I have him rated, behind Harden as the best play on the slate. Now, again, it's significantly behind him, but I will say this, that the third best play I have on the slate here on DraftKings is Vooch. So, and then there's DeRozan. So you could certainly stack all this stuff up. Now, I know that all these guys are better on FanDuel, especially DeRozan. But again, as Bobby likes to say, this is what makes this, pretty valuable here on DraftKings. I don't think people are going to play him. If people want to play him, it stands to reason they'll want to go play him on FanDuel. So you could certainly just stack this up, literally just like this. And then if you want to get really, really funky, you could throw in maybe Kobe White and really get in there. But as I mentioned earlier, that's not the only thing you could do, because you have these big old value plays in Alfonso McKinney at 3K, and then IU, and then Desumnu also. So you could make the case to play, well, you're not going to play all 5 of them, but you could play like a bunch of the Chicagos and run it back with Ja and just root for the thing to go off, And then if you want, you could go put in, what's his name? Brandon Clark. He's a pretty decent value over there in a stack. Again, you can't play all of this, but you could play some of these other plays. Like I bet you could even, you can't quite get away with it, but instead of DeRozan, just for kicks, you put in Clark. Then you could even get a second stud in there. You play all 4 of these Chicago idiots. I shouldn't say, all these 4 Chicago values along with Vooch. You run it back with Morant. You also throw in Brandon Clark. And then you could play one of those guys that we talked about. Like you want to go play, and again, you wouldn't want to put those in the utility, but you put in Kyrie, if you want. Or you could put in Garland. And then you can fill out your lineup that way. So I think this is certainly the best game to stack is the Chicago-Memphis, just because that's where all the value is coming from. But I do see this Brooklyn-Cleveland, if you use Garland and maybe even a Jared Allen, I see that that's kind of viable too. Now, again, these aren't the biggest slates on the, biggest tournaments on the day, these afternoon slates, but you can take advantage of the fact that the people are not going to really play it, So you'll be able to, I guarantee you'll get some good values there that are not going to be as owned as on some of the slates where people are focusing more attention. I've done very, very well on these types of kind of offbeat slates. So I certainly encourage, if you're around, to go ahead and play them. That's pretty much it. And I'll come back in a little while with the main slate. See you later.